Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Without further ado, returning to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, as read by Lord Naren White. We see we was too late, couldn't do no good. We asked some stragglers about it, and they said everybody went to the show looking very innocent and laid low and kept dark till the poor old king was in the middle of his cavortings on the stage. Then somebody give a signal and the house rose up and went for them. So we poked along back home, and I weren't feeling so brash as I was before, but kind of ornery and humble and to blame. Somehow, though, I hadn't done nothing. But that's always the way. It don't make no difference whether you do right or wrong. A person's conscience ain't got no sense and just goes for him anyway. If I had a yaller dog that didn't know no more than a person's conscience does, I would piss on him. It does take up more room than all the rest of a person's insides, and yet ain't no good. Tom Sawyer, he says the same. Chapter 34. We stopped talking and got to thinking. By and by, Tom says, "Looky here, Huck. What fools we are not to think of it before. I bet I know where Jim is." "No, where?" "In that hut down by the ash hopper. Why, looky here. When we was at dinner, didn't you see a black man go in there with some victuals?" "Yes." "What'd you think the victuals was for?" "For a dog." "So'd I." "Well, it wasn't for a dog." "Why?" "Because part of it was watermelon." "So it was, I noticed it." "Well, it does beat all that. I never thought about a dog not eating watermelon. It shows how a body can see and don't see at the same time." "Well, the black unlocked the padlock when he went in, and he locked it again when he came out. He fetched Uncle the key about the time we got up from table. Same key, I bet. Watermelon shows man, lock shows prisoner, and it ain't likely there's two prisoners on such a little plantation, and where the people's all so kind and good. Jim's the prisoner. All right, I'm glad we found it out detective fashion." I wouldn't give shucks. I wouldn't give shucks for any other way. Now you work your mind and study out a plan to steal Jim, and I will study out one too, and we'll take the one we like best, the best. What a head for just a boy to have. If I had Tom Sawyer's head, I wouldn't trade it off to be a duke, nor mate of a steamboat, nor clown in a circus, nor nothing I can think of. I went to thinking out a plan, but only just to be doing something. I knowed very well where the right plan was going to come from. Pretty soon, Tom says, "Ready?" "Yes," I says. "All right, bring it out." "My plan is this," I says. "We can easy find out if Jim is in there. Then we get up my canoe tomorrow night and fetch my raft over from the island. Then the first dark night that comes steal the key out of the old man's breeches after he goes back to bed, and shove off down the river on the raft with Jim, hiding daytimes and running nights, the way me and Jim used to do before. Wouldn't that plan work?" "Work? Why, certainly it would work, like a rat's a-fighting. But it's too blamed simple. There ain't nothing to it. What's the good of a plan there that ain't no more trouble than that? It's as mild as goose milk. Why, Huck, it wouldn't make no more talk than breaking into a soap factory." I never said nothing, because I weren't expecting nothing different. But I knowed mighty well that whenever he got his plan ready, it wouldn't have none of them objections to it. And it didn't. He told me what it was, and I see in a minute it was worth 15 of mine for style, and would make Jim just as free a man as mine would, and maybe get us all killed besides. So I was satisfied, and said we would waltz in on it. I needn't tell what it was here, because I knowed it wouldn't stay the way it was. I knowed he would be changing it around every which way as we went along, and heaving in new bullinesses whenever he got a chance, and that it is what he done. Well, one thing was dead sure, and that was Tom Sawyer was in earnest, and was actually going to help steal that black out of slavery. That was the thing that was too many for me. Here was a boy that was respectable and well brung up and had a character to lose, and folks at home that had characters, and he was bright and not leather-headed, and knowing and not ignorant, and not mean but kind. And yet here he was, without any more pride or rightness or feeling than to stoop to this business, and make himself ashamed and his family ashamed before everybody. I couldn't understand it no way at all. It was outrageous, and I knowed I ought to just up and tell him so, and so be his true friend, and let him quit the thing right when where he was and save himself. And I did start to tell him, but he shut me up and says, "Don't you reckon I know what I'm about? Don't I generally know what I'm about?" "Yes." "Didn't I say I was going to help steal the black?" "Yes." "Well, then?" That's all he said, and that's all I said. It weren't no use to say any more, because when he said he'd do a thing, he always done it. But I couldn't make out how he was willing to go into this thing, so I just let it go, and never bothered no more about it. If he was bound to have it so, I couldn't help it. When we got home, the house was all dark and still, so we went on down to the hut by the ash hopper for to examine it. We went through the yard so as to see what the hounds would do. They knowed us, and didn't make no more noise than country dogs is always doing when anything comes by in the night. When we got to the cabin, we took a look at the front and the two sides, and on the side I wasn't acquainted with, which was the north side, we found a square window hole up tarl high, with just one stout board nailed across it. I says, "Here's the ticket. This hole's big enough for Jim to get through if we wrench on the board." Tom says, "It's as simple as tit-tat-toe, 3 in a row, and as easy as playing hooky. I should hope we can find a way that's little more complicated than that, Huck Finn." "Well then," I says, "how it'll do to saw him out, the way I done before I was murdered that time." "That's more like," he says. "It's real mysterious and troublesome, and good," he says. "But I bet we can find a way that's twice as long. There ain't no hurry. Let's keep on looking around." Betwixt the hut and the fence on the back side was a lean-to that joined the hut at the eaves and was made out of plank. It was as long as the hut, but narrow, only about 6 foot wide. The door to it was at the south end and was padlocked. Tom, he went to the soap kettle and searched around, and fetched back the iron thing they left the lid with. So he took it and prized out one of the staples. The chain fell down, and we opened the door and went in and shut it and struck a match. And see, the shed was only built against a cabin and hadn't no connection with it. And there weren't no floor to the shed, nor nothing in it but some old rusty played-out hose and spades and picks and a crippled plow. The match went out, so did we, and shoved in the staple again, and the door was locked as good as ever. Tom was joyful. He says, "Now we're all right. We'll dig him out. It'll take about a week." Then we started for the house, and I went in the back door. You only have to pull a buckskin latch string. They don't fasten the doors. But that weren't romantical enough for Tom Sawyer. No way would do him, but he must climb up the lightning rod. But after he got up halfway about 3 times, and missed fire and fell every time, and the last time most busted his brains out, he thought he'd got to give it up. But after he was rested, he allowed he would give her one more turn for luck, and this time he made the trip. In the morning, we was up at break of day and down to the black cabins to pet the dogs and make friends with the black that fed Jim. If it was Jim that was being fed, the black's was just getting through breakfast and starting for the fields, and Jim's black was piling up a tin pan with bread and meat and things, whilst the others was leaving, the key come from the house. This black had a good-natured, chuckle-headed face, and his wool was all tied up in little bunches with thread. That was to keep witches off. He said the witches was pestering him awful these nights, and making him see all kinds of strange things, and hear all kinds of strange words and noises, and he didn't believe he was ever witched so long before in his life. He got so worked up and got to running on so about his troubles, he forgot all about what he'd been going to do. So Tom says, and we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.